A little bit sports-related injury.
What kind of sport?
Walking to 3 hospitals with no socks and loafers yesterday. Gracious and loving God, thank you so much for this gathering of friends, and I pray that we find our story in your story, and I pray for this time now in Jesus' name. Amen. So I want us to turn to Luke chapter 24. It's a story only found in Luke, and it's found on page 860 if you've got a cart Bible there. So page 860, it's Luke 24, and we're going to start with the 13th verse. And it's what we read this morning as our gospel lesson, which is the walk to Emmaus. Let's see if y'all think this is fun. Now, again, Luke only remembers this. There are 4 accounts of Jesus and 4 sort of different takes on Easter, and this is a very, very important story, but it's only found one place. Now, on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be crucified, to condemned and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some of the women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him. Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and enter into glory?" Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it's almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." And he went in to stay with them. And when he was at table with them, he took bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were our hearts not burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, and while he was opening the scriptures to us?" In that same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 and their companions gathered together, and they were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed. He has appeared to Simon." And then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Okay, so let's talk about this story for a second. First of all, I want to take you use your imagination, and I want to take you to Israel today. The city of Jerusalem and the city of Tel Aviv are about the same distance as Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. So Tel Aviv's on the coast, and Tel Aviv is Ben Gurion Airport. So when you fly there, you're going to fly to Tel Aviv. And Highway 1 is an east-west highway that's been there for eons because it follows the contour of the land that connects Jerusalem and Tel Aviv on the way to the airport. And so if you're to drive about 7 miles outside of west of Jerusalem on Highway 1, there's an exit called Abu Ghosh. It's an Arab town. It's an Israeli Arab town, which is also the kind of thing that we're going to talk about on May the 3rd. It's too easy to say, Arab-Israeli conflict because there are actually Arab-Israeli citizens with representation in the Knesset. So Abu Ghosh actually is an Arab-Israeli town. They wouldn't call themselves Palestinians. They would call themselves Israeli Arab. And I know this exit well because there's a kebab place called Naji, which is like a really, really great barbecue place. It's amazing. And matter of fact, Naji makes so much money on his kebabs. He's got city people in there. He's got road workers. He's got soldiers. He's got everybody. And everybody stops at Abu Ghosh for beef kebab. However, adjacent to Naji is something that ought to be more famous than Naji, but it's probably not, which is a really, really good-looking Crusader church, and I've got the picture right here. So this is a church that is dedicated to this event that I just told you. As a matter of fact, if you talk to the Benedictine monk who runs this thing, it's a French church, and if you were to talk to him, he would say, "Welcome. This is the site where Jesus broke the bread in Emmaus, right at the end of the journey, 7 miles outside of Jerusalem, just as the Bible said, and was revealed to them in the breaking of the bread, and then vanished from their sight." All right, let's talk about the vanishing for a second. Let's get that out of the way, and we'll talk about Easter. So, if you heard my sermon this morning, you've already heard something like this. If you're going to hear it at 11, I want you to listen for it. There's a book I just finished called Why Faith Matters by a guy named Charles Murray, Why Faith Matters. And he's a fellow who was an agnostic, and through the study of science, he actually came to faith. And how this happened was he realized that statistically, we're not supposed to be here. I mean, the impossibility of our life right now is staggering. What it takes in terms of chemistry, gravity, circumstance, mileage, orbits, tilt, sun, oxygen, on and on and on and on. What he discovered is that our being alive is a miracle. In other words, our being alive is something that God obviously wanted for us. The universe is alive because God wanted it to be alive. There's no randomness to this. It's way too precise for there not to be a mover behind the movement. The analogy that he uses is it's as if you were to use this thought experiment. Hey, would somebody mind closing that door back behind? That way folks can talk, and that way they can be loud back there. Thank you so much. So use this as a thought experiment. Imagine standing before a firing squad of 100 sharpshooters, and they all miss. That's the impossibility of our life. Standing before a firing squad of 100 sharpshooters, and they all miss. And then he added, unless someone standing behind the sharpshooters told them to miss. See, and that's God, and that's our creation, and that is evidence built within the very molecular reality of our life. Now, why I'm saying this is because if God quite impossibly made us with a consciousness, right, and a moral center, and the capacity to love and the capacity to live, if God gave us this life's a miracle enough, then it's no stretch to say that God's going to give us another life, and that's the resurrection life. If God's going to give us this life, God's going to give us another life. God didn't make this to stop it. God didn't make you to stop it. I mean, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and our very existence is a miracle. So the empty tomb is simply our sign that this is how it works, okay? We die, and God gives us our life back. That's it. That's resurrection. Now, what we notice by the resurrection accounts is there's something a little mysterious about it. I mean, Jesus eats with his friends. In the end of the Gospel of John, he eats a charcoal breakfast on the fire. I mean, a charcoal fire breakfast, rather, on the shore of the lake. He eats with them. Here he breaks bread with them. But he seems to appear and disappear in ways that are other, right? I think the otherness of it reminds us that it's not only this life back, but it's another life that we get back. And so the resurrected life is another life. So what does that do for us today? One, take heaven off your worry plate. Okay, you do that. Two, have hope, right? Even as we grieve, we know that we'll be with our loved ones again. Three, have courage. God's got this. I mean, if God's got the resurrection, then God's got everything else too. So I also am a big believer in ordinary resurrections. I mean, like everyday resurrections. So seems kind of silly and flat, but let's just say it's a day where not a whole lot's going on, right? There's not a whole lot of drama, and but somebody's hurt my feelings, or I've just had a lousy day, or I'm just feeling a little low, or a little psychically tired for whatever reason. I will usually find that in the morning I wake up, it's somehow better. That's not merely a good night's sleep. It's somehow better. I find myself in the right place at the right time. Some friend of mine is going to say something to me that I needed to hear. I'm going to see somebody at church that I needed to see, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I call these little ordinary resurrections. In other words, they're little God winks where God's saying, I got this, I got this, I got this. And if you live about 1,000 of these, then you don't have any doubt that there's a big one coming your way. I believe in the resurrection because of all the times I've been resurrected, even from despair or pain. So that's that. So now that's the vanish part. Now I want to talk about Emmaus because this is kind of fun. If the Abu Ghosh exit off of Highway 1 with a handsome Crusader church were the end of the story, that would be enough. Because you could go to see the handsome Crusader church and eat an awesome beef lamb kebab. However, there's another place that claims to be Emmaus. I know, here's the mystery. So 7 miles outside of Jerusalem is the Abu Ghosh exit, but 20 miles outside of Jerusalem is Emmaus. Now, when you play the game of archaeology, that's a village called Emmaus. Archaeology is a game that if you're in the Holy Land, you need to look for churches, especially late Roman churches. Now, the word we use is Byzantine, but they didn't know that word. That's a word that we give them to them. But what you're looking at is a 4th century church, so built in the 300s, at a village called Emmaus. So oftentimes a church will tell you where something is located. Actually the reason why I went in January was to reconnect with my buddy Edon over there while he was on leave between his tours in the Army. And I don't know if he's watching this morning or not because he's in a tank in the Golan. They're right on the Lebanese border, getting ready to support whatever's going on there. So I have a pretty daily conversation with that aspect of the war. But when I went to see him in January, he was in between gigs, so to speak. And so we went to the Sea of Galilee to Bethsaida. Now, some of you have been with me to Israel, or you've been with Israel, and if you remember, there's a 10-mile arc that goes from Magdala in the west over to Bethsaida in the east, right over the Jordan River. And what happens up there is that most of the Gospels take place in just a 10-mile radius because that's where the fish are. And these guys got to work for a living, and all the fish, or most of the fish in the Sea of Galilee, are in the shallows in the grass. And Jesus and his friends literally fished for tilapia. So remember that next time you go to Publix. It's just tilapia. Although theirs is better, it's a little more robust. It just doesn't live in a little pond somewhere. I mean, it's got a little more muscle to him. But you have to catch them with nets, and so that's where the fish are. That's where the Gospels happen. So another reason why I believe all this is real, by the way, is that if we were to make this story up, I don't think we would tell stories about Capernaum and Magdala and Bethsaida, which are extremely unimportant places. And if we were to look at myths in any other religion, they don't include kind of unimportant places, right? These people are dirt poor, and they live in little rocks and mud and that sort of thing. So Bethsaida is a place that no one has seen until 3 years ago. Now, there is an exit called Bethsaida. It's right over the Jordan River. It's where the Jordan comes into the Sea of Galilee. And there's a sign that says Bethsaida. But what they had found up until 3 years ago was something older than the time of Jesus called Bethsaida, and something later than the time of Jesus called Bethsaida. But since the war and since COVID, archaeologists have had some time because they're not doing anything else. They're not teaching school or guiding or anything. And so they found a church. This is what I mean about a church. They found a church that dates about like this one. So it's a 4th, maybe 5th century church. But what's crazy about it is it's cattywampus. So most Roman churches always faced east. It's that whole sunrise thing, and then also it's kind of a Jerusalem thing. So the churches always faced east, and they're usually cruciform. So St. Luke's, you'll be interested to know, follows that ancient pattern. It faces east, and it's also cruciform. The chapel is one arm of the cross, and the other arm of the cross is the Sunday school hall, and that's kind of how we do it. But we do the same thing. There are churches on the east-west axis. But this church in Bethsaida is not. It's cattywampus. And so they started digging beneath the apse, which is the area where the high altar would be, and they found a 1st century house. Now, they've done enough of this before, looking at old churches and finding places that commemorate things, that they're pretty sure that this is St. Peter's childhood home. In the mud, by the lake, just where the Bible said he grew up, right? And so when you find the church, you find the spot. Okay, let me go back to the mystery of Emmaus. So Abagosh off of Highway 1, that's a Crusader church, which means that it was built in the thousands, right, the 1000s. That's the era that it was built. This church was built in the 4th century, 5th century at the latest. And remembering that churches usually mark sites, and that's a village called Emmaus, which one is the real Emmaus? Well, it's hard to tell, right? Because the village named Emmaus in the 5th century church, that's 20 miles outside of town. Now, what did the Bible say? The Bible said, now on that day, the two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. Okay, so Naji Kebab is 7 miles outside of Jerusalem, is where the Bible says, right in the Crusader church. It's 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. Except there's a village called Emmaus, 20 miles outside of Jerusalem. And also it was called Emmaus at the time of Christ. As a matter of fact, it predates the time of Christ. Emmaus had a role at the time of the Maccabees, which you might remember is that intertestamental period between the Old and the New Testament, where a family of warrior priests actually cleansed the temple. It's the story of Hanukkah and brought religion back to the land. Emmaus has a role in that story too as a place near battleground. So we know Emmaus exists. We know that it's really Emmaus. So now there are two of them, two claimants, if you will. A handsome Crusader church 7 miles outside of Jerusalem and a village called Emmaus with a Byzantine church 20 miles outside of Jerusalem. Well, let's read it one more time. Now, on that same day, the two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. All right, look where it says 7 miles. See the word miles has a little N? This is a study Bible. Now go down to your notes. So let's find the N, L-M-N-O-P. Okay, N, it's down at the bottom. In the Greek, 60 stadia. That's 7 miles. Other ancient authorities read 160 stadia. 160 stadia would locate it at the village of Emmaus. 60 stadia would locate it at Naji Kebab. Okay, now here's what my studied friends are asking me to consider. These are archaeologists in Israel today, have a theory. Books were written by hand, by scribes, okay? They were copied over and over and over and over. And it's very possible that this saying that it's 7 miles from Jerusalem is a scribal error. 60 stadia, 160 stadia. Can you imagine a sleepy little monk? He's got a sputtering little candle, and he's just kind of maybe he sneezed or something, and he didn't write down a 1. And then suddenly a Crusader church gets built because the dude sneezed. Okay, so there you go. I mean, there's a human element to Scripture in this dialogue with God that I find charming, and so that's certainly a possibility. And so for that reason, I'm going to put my money with the late Romans, who are closer to the source, right? They're closer to oral tradition. They're closer to memory. They too know that there's a village called Emmaus here, as opposed to a Crusader church, which was built many, many, many years later. So I'm going to put my money with this as the Emmaus. Okay, I've just solved one mystery. Oh, but here's another. Okay, I love this. I love this talk. I didn't even have to have notes. All right, here we go. Now, I had this slide at Christmas time, and I just added the red to it. So there were 3 pilgrim routes to Jerusalem for worship. Now, the first century Hebrews had a crazy religion. It was crazy. What you would do is you would go to the synagogue every Sabbath, and that would be the local, like, Sunday school, and it'd be intergenerational, and everybody would go, and everybody, they had 100% literacy rates, because you know how to read to worship, and so they were teaching the children. It makes me really happy when I see children trundle off during worship to Children's Chapel, because this is exactly what they did in Nazareth when Jesus was a little boy. And when he went home to preach, I'm sure he saw his old teachers there again, the people who taught him the stories of Elijah and Elisha and Ahab and all the things that happened in their neighborhood 800 years before. And so anyway, they would do that Sabbath after Sabbath. And it was a community center, and they would do outreach. But 3 times a year, you go at least once, 3 if you could swing it. You would walk to Jerusalem for worship. So this one was from Christmas, so I had it basically going from Nazareth to Bethlehem, but Bethlehem is a suburb of Jerusalem, so you can get it. So from Nazareth, for instance, Nazareth, for instance, you would have to walk the same distance from Birmingham to Montgomery for the Passover. At least the Passover. Now, if you could swing it, you would go from Birmingham to Montgomery for Pentecost, which is 50 days later, which we're going to celebrate 50 days after Easter. Or you could also go down there in the fall for Sukkot, or the booths. So you could do that too. So in the fall one, I think, was the fun one, because they made little tents and stuff, and it was a big party, kind of like the Grove at Ole Miss. All right, so it's just very, very similar to that. So what you would do is you would walk for 5 days to these festivals, and this is where you would worship. So the synagogue is for study, the temple is for worship. Now, we do both of these things in church, by the way. We have the first part of the service that we call the Liturgy of the Word. That's where we study, and I preach, and we pray, and we think about God, and then we pass the peace, and then the clergy move around the altar, and that's the worship part, right? That's the temple part. So we're actually heirs of their worship. We just do it all in one room. So they would study, and then they would go to Jerusalem for worship. And the population of Jerusalem would swell from 25,000 to 100,000 people. I mean, or more. I mean, it was a crazy. I've heard some numbers that you might have 1 million people in Jerusalem at the time for a festival. It was just this crazy movement of people, and you can imagine it drove the Romans absolutely nuts, because the Roman governor stayed on the coast at Caesarea Maritima in a very nice palace with an infinity pool. So he did not want to come into Jerusalem on Route 1, just like you can travel today, on Route 1, to come back to this dusty, ornery religious town with 1 million pilgrims, right? And any kind of trouble could happen, which is, of course, the story of the Passion. But the pilgrim routes, there were 3. So let's remember, this story happens on Easter morning, and then hold that thought. The way that Jesus probably walked from Nazareth to Jerusalem was probably the one to the right of the 3. Okay, the red one I added, but the right of the 3, that is the eastern shore of the Jordan River. If you've been with me to Israel, you've followed this route with me before. There's a highway that runs along the western shore, because obviously you can't be in the kingdom of Jordan. Jesus probably right across the river, but it's the same topography. Hot, dusty, dirty, dangerous. If you don't carry a lot of water with you, you're not going to make it. It's not a safe place. And then when you get to Jericho, which is the oldest inhabited town on earth at 10,000 years of continual habitation, you hang a right, and you climb some 3,500 feet up a mountain, kind of like driving up to Cashers, except you're down in a hole. So you're 1,400 feet below sea level to start with, and your ears are just popping as you're riding up into this thing. And you're basically you're just for the longest time, you're on this highway, climbing, and finally you see sea level. There's a sign that says sea level. You think, dang, we're just now starting over, right? And it is the craziest place on earth because it's the Great Rift Valley. It's where the tectonic plates of Asia and Africa meet. And the Bible doesn't really tell us this, but it is really funky down there, and it's dangerous down there. If you were a resident of Jerusalem today on a cold winter day, which is when they get their rain, and their weather's about like Birmingham, it's very, very similar to Birmingham. You get some snow sometimes, but they get sleet and they get rain. If you want to warm up, you just drive down in this hole, and it's 80 degrees down there. Take your bathing suit and go sit by the Dead Sea. So it's like having your own personal beach, 2 hours total drive down there, and it's just crazy. The reason why I mention this is because this is a dangerous way to go to Jerusalem, and you have to ask the question, why did he do that? Because the one in the middle, so the middle route that you're looking at, is through what today in the newspaper we call the disputed West Bank of the Jordan River, or Judea, Samaria, or whatever people want to call it. This is the place where the settlers are fighting over land with the Palestinian Authority and all that. Well, it was dangerous then too because it was the land of the Samaritans. And we can talk about Samaritans at length, but there ain't no fight like a family fight, and the Samaritans are just close enough to the Hebrews at the time that they just really don't like one another, which makes the parable of the Good Samaritan so remarkable, right? It's the good enemy, if you will, for Jesus to use a Samaritan of all people to talk about love and neighborliness and all that stuff and to bring down those barriers. So Jesus probably didn't travel down the middle route that much, except in Luke's gospel, we're told that on the last trip to Jerusalem of his life, he did it. He went through Samaritan lands. And so part of the drama of Luke's gospel, if we know this, is knowing that he's going a different route. Now, you notice I told you about two, but I didn't tell you about the red line. Now, the red line is a third possible pilgrim route. And on the corner, you see I just kind of shot the red line out west and then turned north. Right at the turn north is the village of Emmaus. Right at the turn north is the village of Emmaus. However, and it's also on a route, a north-south highway, and I forget the highway number. I know y'all don't care. I think it's 6. But it's a Roman road called the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea. The reason why I add this route is because I don't think Jesus would have used this route much, if at all, because it's way too out of the way. From Nazareth, you don't go the wrong direction and then down and over, especially if you're walking and you're carrying water, right? And you've got pack animals and you've got a caravan. You're going to try to go the most direct route. So that would be a way that they would walk. Which now I want to tease our imaginations for a second. By the way, this is a little bit of this is conjecture on my part, or maybe an educated guess, but I just want us to tease our imaginations for just a moment. Emmaus is in the wrong direction. And I wonder if the original hearers of the story or the readers of the story might have thought, wow, like the thing begins, they're walking on the road to Emmaus. Why are they going there? Okay, Easter has happened. The Passover is finished, right? People are packing up and going home, right? They're going back to where they're from. And so would you not imagine that you would, if you traveled the same pilgrim routes for the entirety of your life, that you would know people on the way, right, along the way? There's down by Jericho, there's a gas station, convenience store thing. I think some of y'all went with me and got sick there. We won't eat there anymore. It's Fahaz. They got the cheap camel rides out front. And he'll for a couple, maybe 20 shekels, he'll ride you around on a really sad camel around the parking lot. But you can get your picture made, that one picture with and then the thing is you smell like Fahaz's camel the rest of the day. So it's really not worth the 20 shekels. But anyway, I want to put a plaque out in front of Fahaz, because I think that's about the place where Joseph and Mary realized that they left Jesus when he was 12. Back at the, right? That'd be a cool pilgrim stop. People would take their picture and pray out there, maybe light a candle in front of Fahaz. Because that's where Mary said, I thought you had him. And then Joseph said, I thought you had him, right? And they had to go back. And whose fault was it? Joseph's. Okay, so there's that biblical story. Anyway, I tease your imagination because I know Fahaz, because that's where you get gas and you buy Pringles, right? And you've been in the car all day. And so I know Fahaz. Well, Jesus knew places and they knew him, traveling the same route year after year after year after year. So they would have known Jesus on the on the eastern route, and they probably would have known Jesus on the middle route, but no one would have known Jesus on the western route. Now, remember, I want to tease your imaginations for a minute. The resurrection life is different, but then it's not different. I mean, he eats, right? He eats with them, and they can touch him, they can see him, and then sometimes he can vanish. But he's not entirely ghost-like. He's not always flying around. I mean, there's some walking in this reality. Why is he going in the wrong direction? Well, I asked this of an archaeologist friend of mine who is a smart guy. He's not a Christian. He's actually just a scientist, and an Israeli. But he said, Rich, I think he's going to Emmaus because he's more dangerous resurrected than he was before. He's more dangerous. You know, there's a theme in the Gospels called the Messianic secret, where Jesus has to really keep it on the lowdown, because people, they want to use him. They want to use him for a miracle. They want to use him for something. They want to use him to either see a show or to tweak the nose of the enemy, or they want a general to kick the Romans out of their land, or whatever they want. And God will not be used that way. God's not a vending machine. And God's not our own little personal concierge. I say this to the guys at the Bible study all the time. It's good to audit your prayers and to make sure that your prayers are more thank you than help me. I'm just saying. I mean, if the only time you pray is when you need something, then wow, lucky God. God has you to worry him when you need something. No, just remember to also lift up prayers of thanks and make God smile that you notice what God did for you today. Right? So there are only two prayers. Help me, help me, help me, and thank you, thank you, thank you. So say thank you more. Okay, let's go back to this thing. My friend Danny Herman believes that Jesus was avoiding being used as a totem by pilgrim groups going back home, and would thus go a different way so that nobody would know who he was. Now, I don't know that there's any other explanation. Why would Jesus be walking the wrong way, right? Now you're saying, what's this totem thing, Rich? Well, let me offer you an example of how totems work and how they don't work. So there's a very important place in the Galilee that's not in the Bible. It's not in the Bible, but it's cool. It's called Hattin, and it's a volcanic mountain, and they call it the Horns of Hattin because of the crater, and it looks like it's got two horns on it. It's a pretty neat looking thing. It's pretty dramatic. It's up over the Sea of Galilee, just kind of right outside of the lake, and you can actually see it from Galilee. And then when you're on top of the mountain of Hattin, you can see the lake as well. So on July 4th, 1187, a big battle happened there, the Battle of Hattin. You can look it up; it's pretty cool. The newly crowned king of Jerusalem, Guy de Lusignan. So Jerusalem had been under Crusader hands for a century. And he was newly crowned because his son Baldwin V had died, and so he was now the new guy. And he's a terrible guy, okay? And my friend who actually told me the story was an Israeli British kid who grew up, went to the IDF, kind of like some kids from Mount Brook do, went to the IDF and stayed. So you got a British guy telling me the story, and he goes, "Of course they're terrible. They're French, right?" And so Guy de Lusignan is in his own arrogance takes all the Crusader armies of the Levant in the middle part of this country, and they take them to the Battle of Hattin, take them to this mountain, and they camp on the top of the mountain. Except they're now far from water. They've cut off their water source. Now, I like to tell you that when you learn Bible stories, pay attention to water. Pay attention to what water means. Egypt is powerful because they got water. Mesopotamia is powerful because they got water, right? And in the middle, they got to be real careful about water. You can't leave water. You can't leave a well. You fight over water sources. So these Crusader armies go to this mountain, to the top of this mountain, in July, and it's hot. It's hotter than bullets over there. Actually, it's hotter there than here in July. That one I do know. So like Fahrenheit, it could be 112, 115. Oh yeah, and it's just, so this is not their tourist season at all. And so now you're a Crusader army in armor, chainmail and a helmet, and you're out there. So they're facing Saladin. So Saladin is the new sultan of a unified, government, sultanate, whatever they called it. And so Saladin's a really smart guy. They've got these light little Arabian horses, and they start riding circles around the Crusader armies on this mountain. And the Crusaders have an English war horse. That's their super weapon, which is basically just a flesh and blood tank. Okay, now you can imagine that these horses are thirsty too. And they're thirsty. And Saladin starts lighting brush fires around the mountain. That's all he's doing. They're just riding in circles, lighting fires. It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. I mean, they're baking in these things. So at one point, the Crusaders just try to break out of the siege. I mean, now they've found themselves in a siege mentality. They try to break out of it by sending the war horses through to sort of break a hole, if you will. Well, unfortunately for the Crusader armies, the horses can see the water too in the lake down there. And so the horses, when they start moving, you can't stop them, okay? And the horses, and so Saladin just opens the wall, and the English war horses just go down to the river, go down to the lake rather, and start drinking water, and then they can kill those riders down there. In other words, the threat is removed. It's a total loss. Now, why am I telling you? This is Sunday school. Why am I telling you all this story? It's a complete loss. As a matter of fact, the Crusaders never control the middle part of the Holy Land again. They only have a coastal outpost, stuff what's in Turkey now, and also Acre, which is up near the Lebanese-Israeli border. It's called Akko now. Never again. The Crusader era in Jerusalem is over at this battle. I'm telling you the story because they carried with them what they believed to be the true cross. Now, I don't think it's really the cross, but what happened was when Empress Helena built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the 4th century, remember what I said about old churches? So when she built that, she also believed, or other people believed, that they found the cross upon which Christ was killed. Now I'll tell you, if you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today, it's pretty darn cool because that is Calvary. That's Golgotha. And what's really cool about it is it's very close to the Dome of the Rock, which means that Jesus didn't die on a hill far away, stood an old rugged cross. He dared staring literally in the shadow of the very temple itself. So when the failed temple was torn in two at Jesus' death, I mean, that's like a showdown that's happening really, really close and personal. But anyway, from the 4th century on, they believed that they carried the cross upon which Christ died. And they carried it into this battle, and they lost it. Totems don't work. That's also a story from the Old Testament when the priest Eli's children take the Ark of the Covenant into a battle and they lose it to the Philistines. God is not a lucky rabbit's foot. And so I think this is a story of the danger of is totemism a word? In other words, Christ was not going to be a totem for anybody, even in his resurrected form. He's elusive to them. So, hey, there we go. That's the story of Emmaus, and there's a lot to it, right? In just that one little verse, 160 stadia or 60 stadia. All right, I'm going to turn this off, see if y'all have any questions.